welcome to the British Humanist Association's Voltaire Lecture for this year. If you're tweeting, the hashtag is BHA Voltaire. The Voltaire Lecture was established by the legacy of Theodore Besterman, who was a biographer of Voltaire, and is now under the administration of the British Humanist Association. Many distinguished luminaries over the years have delivered this lecture, from Ludovic Kennedy to Lady Wootton, the first woman in the House of Lords as an appointed peer, Richard Dawkins, the classicist Natalie, Haynes. We're very pleased this evening to have been supported by other organisations in the putting on of this lecture: the International Humanist and Ethical Union, Index on Censorship, English Pen, British Muslims for Secular Democracy, New Humanist and Article 19, all of whom have helped us to make our guest this evening welcome and get publicity for her important cause and topic. 10 years ago next week, those of us in London experienced a small taste of the violence that Islamic extremism can deal out. In the humanist movement, we lost in the bus bombing one of our local group leaders, Giles Hart, chair of the Havering Humanists, lifelong peace activist and anti-slavery activist, and campaigner within Polish Solidarity. But increasingly, humanists are not only the incidental victims of this sort of violence. Increasingly, they are targets, deliberate targets of it. The International Humanist and Ethical Union Annual Freedom of Thought Report records a growing list of countries where there is active state persecution of humanists by the authorities, from Malaysia to the Maldives, from Saudi Arabia to Indonesia. And within this context of growing state persecution, there is increasingly a culture of impunity amongst those throughout society who would target non-religious people with their violence. The BHA, of course, does its own work to attempt to correct this global problem. We work with the UK Foreign Office to attempt to enlist our government's own efforts in improving freedom of speech, freedom of religion and belief worldwide. But in addition to that, we're very proud to be able to showcase this evening at our Voltaire Lecture a speaker who has herself done such incredible work. It's obviously, we always try and get a theme, a Voltairean theme to the lecture, but this year, I think you'll agree, is particularly pertinent to his life and work. Tolerance, a great humanist value to be shared by people of goodwill, hopefully from other religions, all religions too. Freedom of thought and freedom of speech. I'm going to hand over now to the President of the British Humanist Association, Jim Al-Khalili, to introduce this evening's lecturer. Please welcome Jim to the stage.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before we start, could I just ask if someone could bring some water for our speaker, because we were... Oh, there is a bottle down there. There you go. Fine. Good. I've just suddenly spotted it. Right, and I thought I'd printed my words in large enough fonts not to need my reading glasses, but just as a precaution. Oh, you have yours as well. Good evening and welcome again to this very special Voltaire Lecture. So our speaker this evening has become accustomed to taking many precautions in her everyday life, and yet Rafida Ahmed Bonya has refused to be silenced. Indeed, tonight she's been accompanied by two close protection officers for her safety. The hotel have provided security staff because she simply doesn't know what awaits her around the next corner. And this is in the UK. Imagine life in many countries around the world where freedom of speech and expression are, if not outlawed entirely, then certainly under threat, such as in Bangladesh. While we watch the regular tragic stories of atrocities committed in the name of religion on the news, daily almost it seems, we nevertheless all too often, I think, congratulate ourselves in this country as we see the steady rise of secularism, tolerance, rationalism, a mutual respect between people of varied and various worldviews, be they based on religious faith or not. We fight our battles, certainly at the British Humanist Association. We do what we can. We fight our battles to ensure that our education system is fair, that our political system doesn't grant any one religious group special privileges or advantages. We like to think we campaign for worthy causes, such as assisted dying, to have the voices of non-religious people across the country heard throughout society, to combat the forces of irrationality, such as those who would wish to infect our schoolchildren with the nonsense of creationism. But we're brought down to earth when we hear of the horrors committed in the name of religions elsewhere. In February 2013, the world was shocked when Ahmed Rajib Haidar, an atheist blogger from Bangladesh, was murdered by Islamists wielding machetes. This year, the horrors came back. On the 26th of February 2015, Bonya Ahmed and her husband, Avijit Roy, both humanist bloggers, were visiting the National Book Fair of Bangladesh when they were brutally attacked by Islamic fundamentalists with machetes. Avijit had for years written about science and rationalism and critiqued religious fundamentalism. Because of this, he was killed, hacked to death on a crowded street in an open area near Dhaka University. Bonya herself sustained serious stab wounds to her head, arms and hands, and had a thumb sliced off in the attack. 4 weeks after Avijit's murder, a second humanist blogger, Washikur Rahman, was murdered. Then in May a third, Ananta Bijoy Das. Bonya's story is remarkable, as tragic as it is inspiring. I will let her tell you that story tonight, but as a brief background, she and Avijit met online in 2002 when she was a young single mum working as a tech manager in Atlanta in the US, and he was working in Singapore. He noticed a blog post from her in which she criticized religion. She says, a lot of people attacked her online for that post. I was intimidated and didn't respond. The next day, someone named Avijit Roy is defending me. The rest is history. They were married, they've continued their blogging. For Avijit, this meant a tragic end to his life. Like many, I'm sure, in this audience tonight, Avijit was, in Bonya's words, an intellectually fulfilled atheist who dedicated his life to promoting science and secularism. For Bonya, the fight goes on, as we'll hear now more passionately than ever. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rafida Ahmed Bonya.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Let me thank British Humanist Association, such a historical and prestigious organization, for giving me the chance to speak with you tonight. I am Rafida Ahmed Bonya, and my late husband, Dr. Avijit Roy, and I were Bangladeshi American citizens and humanists. And we are the recent victims of Islamic terrorism in Bangladesh. Avijit and I visited our homeland, Bangladesh, on February 16th to attend the annual National Book Fair. The fair is a nationally renowned event attended by thousands of people, held through the entire month of February. On the 26th of February, when we were leaving the well-lit, very crowded book fair to get back to our car, Avijit and I were brutally attacked by the Islamic fundamentalists. We were stabbed repeatedly with machetes on the side of the road. The area was surrounded by police officers and video cameras, and thousands of people. Nobody came to help us. The police stood by. We owe thanks to a young journalist who did act, rushed us to the nearby hospital a little later. Avijit was killed, and I was badly injured as a result of the 4 stabs, the head wounds I have. My thumb was sliced off. I have injuries on both hands, fingers, and my body. I have multiple surgeries to repair the nerves and the arteries on my hands. Just over 4 months on, I'm still undergoing medical treatment. Avijit was perhaps the most prominent victim of these machete-wielding assailants. but he was neither the first nor the last victim. Since his murder at the end of February, Islamist fundamentalists have successfully killed another 2 humanist bloggers in Bangladesh in a very similar way. Blogger Washikur Rahman Babu was killed on 30th of March. 2 men were arrested at the spot by the bystanders. No thanks to the police. Said they killed Washikur despite never having read his blog themselves, but under the orders from someone at their madrasas. I will return to this point a little later. Then on 12th of May, Ananta Bijoy Das was killed. Like Avijit, Ananta wrote about science and philosophy. He also edited a magazine called Reason. He was very close to us. He called me sister and worked with us for a long time. I think they have attacked 8 secular activists, if I'm right, bloggers and writers, including Professor Shafiqul Islam in 2014, the blogger Ahmed Rajib Haidar in 2013, a failed attempt on life of Asif Mohiuddin, also in 2013, and of course, Professor Humayun Ajad back in 2003. Those are the facts of the recent events in Bangladesh. Now, let me share with you a little bit more about Avijit, his work, his passion, his writing, and our life together. After that, I will ask the question, how did it come to this? I think before I start on that, I should present 2 disclaimers to you guys. First, English is my second language. It is a very weird blend of Bangladeshi English, the sitcoms I have watched when I was a teenager, exported from the US, mix of Canadian English, Minnesotan English, the states in the South, our beloved Bible Belt. So if you don't understand something I am saying, please note it in your head and ask me later. I would be happy to explain. The second one, I am very, don't know the exact word. I guess I'm very scattered, mentally scattered. My thoughts are still scattered. My life is scattered. It has been 4 months since Avijit's death. It took me actually literally 6 weeks to realize that I have not just lost Avijit. I am also injured. I did not realize that for a long time. He was my friend, my partner in crime, in happiness, sadness, endless conflicts, and love. So let me talk about that now. Actually, there is a third disclaimer. I need my glasses. Forgot about that. Avijit, well, I used to call him Avi. So from now on, I'm going to refer to him as Avi. Created the first online free thinking platform in Bangla called Mukto-Mona, which means free thinker, in 2001, when he was a PhD student in Singapore, National University of Singapore, studying biomedical engineering. Mukto-Mona is not just a blog, it is a platform and a community. Along with the other moderators, bloggers, writers, and the community, Mukto-Mona became the name of a secular humanist movement of Bangla-speaking people. It was special for me in more than one way. As Jim mentioned, I first met Avi in 2002 through Mukto-Mona. We collaborated on most of the projects and writing. I actually edited all his books, painfully. We were united on the principles of humanism. We also intensely disagreed and debated over some of our core beliefs and ideological stands, as good humanists should do. Our debates regarding our writings, especially about socioeconomic and political aspects of humanism, were so passionate that our daughter thought for a long time that we are fighting all the time. It took her a few years to realize that these are mostly, not all, philosophical debates, not marital squabbles. Avi was an atheist, a blogger, a writer, and above all, he was a secular humanist who tried to answer the larger questions in life. Avijit wrote about science, which he loved. On his last book was called how the universe could emerge from nothing. He wrote books on origin of life, science behind homosexuality, yet another one on love from perspective of evolutionary psychology, history of physics. He even wrote a literary piece regarding the relationship between Nobel laureate poet Rabindranath Tagore and Argentinian feminist writer Victoria Ocampo. But two of his books, The Virus of Faith and The Philosophy of Disbelief, created far greater attention. On one hand, they made him exceedingly popular among the young, progressive readers. On the other hand, these books fueled hostility and anger towards Avijit from religious fundamentalists. We wrote in Bangla because we wanted to popularize the basic as well as the cutting-edge concepts of science and philosophy and art in this language. I wrote a book on biological evolution named Along the Path of Evolution a few years ago as well. Avi wrote countless articles, blogs, and writing. Writing was his passion, his life. To be honest, he expressed himself better through writing than talking. In fact, he so failed sometimes to meet my demand for verbal communication that we wrote hundreds of letters. I actually sit down with them sometimes, like now in the last 4 months. Hundreds of letters, handwritten letters to each other for the last 13 years. Anyway, he did not only write about science and atheism, he wrote in opposition to all kinds of prejudice, injustice, unscientific and irrational beliefs. He protested injustice and intolerance in society everywhere and anywhere, something which can be demonstrated in the breadth of topics he covered in his writings. It extended from women's rights. He has a beautiful article, heartfelt piece on Hypatia. Nationalism, trying the Islamic fundamentalists who committed war crimes during the liberation war of Bangladesh. He protested the Iraq War, wrote against the torture in Abu Ghraib, massacres in Gujarat, Palestine. Even the nationalistic views of Bangladeshi government and the military actions against minority ethnic groups in southeastern Bangladesh. He reacted strongly against the UNC Chapel Hill shooting in the States last year, in which 3 students were shot in their apartment by a man who had advocated atheism on Facebook. Avi wrote, "Atheism is characterized by an absence of belief in the existence of supernatural gods and goddesses. To me, it is a rational concept to oppose any unscientific and irrational belief. But being an atheist does not automatically make you free from prejudice or hatred, unless you have compassion for humanity. It does not matter if you are religious or not. Intolerance is everywhere. History suggests that there were indeed many non-religious, heartless, autocratic rulers who mercilessly killed numerous countrymen. Now we know there is Craig Stephen Hicks, who has a hatred for Muslims. These criminals deserve no sympathy or excuses. The NC Chapel Hill killings are inhuman and should be denounced by every human being with the slightest conscience." If Friedrich Nietzsche were here, I've been reading Nietzsche lately, he might have said, Avijit looked at science from the perspective of artists and looked at art from the perspective of life, meaning that science was for him a passion and something to speculate about and wonder in, and art was not something abstract or otherworldly, but at its best, a force for change in life. Avi was also a normal human being who made his fair share of mistakes and had flaws. He was a bad singer, completely out of tune. It's to drive me crazy. He was intimidated by the practical and financial aspects of life. That was also not good. And very goofy at home. He was also a father, a role model, and a friend to our daughter. But above all, he knew what he was doing, where he wanted to go. And he knew the colossal risk he was taking by standing up and being counted. He said in one of his writings, Those who think victory will be realized without any bloodshed are merely living in a fool's paradise. We risk our lives the moment we started. The moment we started wielding our pens against religious bigotry and fundamentalism. Which brings us on to this wider context, the deeper history of Bangladesh. How did we really come to this point in a supposed secular democracy such as Bangladesh, where humanists and secularists can be hacked to death in front of thousands of people on the street? In the American South, I get a very weird blank look when I tell someone that I'm originally from Bangladesh. I know you guys are not like that at all, but I would just like to refresh your memory for my sake. Anyway, Bengal was a part of the Indian subcontinent under the British Empire for more than 200 years. In 1947, the colony was divided into two independent countries, India and Pakistan. The hasty boundaries correlated roughly with the divide between Islam and Hinduism. And of course, that divide would lie behind hundreds of thousands of deaths and displacement of many millions, one of the largest human migrations in history. But the India-Pakistan divide was not the only divide. East Bengal, or the eastern part of Pakistan, was itself separated from western Pakistan by thousands of miles of Indian territory in between, and also by differing cultures and identities. In Bengal, a dichotomy of Bengali and Muslim identities was prevalent from the very introduction of Islam in the religion. However, the Bengali cultural identity was more deep-rooted, and it was inevitable that it would resurface under the political and economic discrimination and oppression of the Bengalis by the ruling Pakistanis. So the desire for independence began pretty early, starting with the Bengali language movement in 1952, right after 1947, when the Pakistani government decided to exclude Bengali as an official language of Pakistan. Young Bengalis sacrificed their lives to protest the exclusion. Students died on the streets on 21st of February in 1952 to secure their rights to use Bengali as an official language. Today, to honor their memory, we celebrate Language Martyrs Day, which is also celebrated as International Mother's Language Day now, at the very same Dhaka National Book Fair where Avijit was killed. He was actually brought up in that area as well. His father was a professor, a physics professor in Dhaka University, so he actually showed it to me. I think 3, 4, 5 days ago. We took a rickshaw and he showed where the apartment they lived in, the elementary school they went to, and I took him to the medical college, Dhaka Medical College that I dropped off of. So anyway, finally in 1971, after an arduous 9-month liberation war, which killed millions of people, East Pakistan emerged as an independent nation state called Bangladesh. So it's a relatively new country. The new constitution of Bangladesh has secularity, nationalism, democracy, and socialism as its basic principles, but in reality, none of them were implemented. The country saw an astonishing emergence of Muslim identity after a coup overthrowing the government in 1975. Principles of secularism were replaced with absolute trust and faith in Almighty Allah, and democracy was replaced with autocratic military rule. Despite all that, when we were teenagers, during the mid and late 80s, it felt like Bengali Muslims were still pretty liberal, certainly compared to today. I was openly an atheist since the age of 13. I left Bangladesh in 1990, but the political and social landscape gradually changed. Religious fundamentalism rose in Bangladesh. A major player in this rise is the international Islamist party, Jamaat-e-Islami. Not only has their political influence been rising, but with funding from the Middle East, They have been building a financial and business empire as well. They have their fingers into politics, into the most religious conservative parts of the society, and they wield this financial and demographic might to influence the government. And all our governments, so-called secular and non-secular governments, have bent their knees to their demands one way or the other. The ruling political party in Bangladesh is Malik right now. They are supposed to be the largest secular political party in the country. Yet in the name of the political expediency, they have repeatedly bent their knee to the religious fundamentalists, acceding to their demands and granting their wishes in a manner that can only be described as bribery in order to secure their votes. Last time they came to power with a mandate to identify senior political figures connected to contemporary Islamist parties and holding them accountable for the war crimes they committed during the liberation of Bangladesh. I will take a second to have some water. Sorry, my medications make me very thirsty. In 2010, war crimes trial began. Trials came to a head in late 2012 and early 2013. The Islamists were under extreme pressure, with voter support for Islamist parties declining and senior Islamists finally being found guilty of those war crimes. The Islamic fundamentalists turned their attention to the atheists. If Islamist leaders might be put to death for war crimes, that's the sentence for war crimes in Bangladesh, then the secularists and atheists who called for justice must themselves meet the same fate. Fundamentalists in the past few years have therefore produced a number of hit lists, naming intellectuals, writers, and bloggers they want to see dead and making them widely available online. Avijit, Ananta, all were in that list. They came up with this infamous hit list of 84 bloggers in 2013, backed by these mainstream political parties who presented it to the government as a list of bloggers they would like to see arrested for insulting religion and sentenced to death. They proposed a new blasphemy law that should be punishable by death, and they wanted this law to be applied retrospectively to those bloggers that they deemed to have insulted Islam. It named targets that good Islamists could assassinate. We are also here reminded how medieval theologian Al-Ghazali gave all good Muslims the right to kill the Muslim philosophers who had different opinions about some metaphysical doctrines. In other words, both political Islamists and extremists are now systematically threatening those who dare oppose them, issuing new death threats and creating a culture of fear in the country. Literally, there are a number of bloggers right now who is to write with pen names. The real names have been exposed, and they are on the run. At this point, perhaps, anyway, I'm going back to 2013. After they suggested the blasphemy law, the Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, could have slapped down the Islamists. She could have said, no, people have the right to express themselves, to demonstrate, to write, to question, to criticize. But instead, this is what she said. We do not need a new blasphemy law because we already have a law against hurting religious sentiments, and we can prosecute the bloggers under that law. So the authorities received the list of suspected bloggers. Officials promised to investigate, and then they arrested 4 of those bloggers from the list and pursued them through the courts. Avijit campaigned tirelessly for months to free these bloggers. So what happens when you give bullies what they want? What happens when you accede to crazy demands? Soon there were 100,000 Islamists marching on the streets of Dhaka demanding not just death to atheist bloggers, but for the cancellation of planned new education reforms that would have helped girls into education. And yet, the government again made concessions. Since 2013, Islamists have been granted demands after demands, while the attackers of those first victims, Ahmed, Asif, and others, were never found. To give another example, most pertinent to the anti-atheist violence is a 2013 amendment to the so-called Information and Communication Technology Act. This is a hard one. The act produced by the previous conservative government was already oppressive, outlawing any publications or broadcasts or websites that are fake and obscene, obscene being a highly subjective term, of course, and outlawing any expression which may corrupt, again, an incredibly vague term. And there are echoes of Socrates corrupting the youth here. Furthermore, the Communications Act outlaws any communications that causes to hurt or may hurt religious belief. Those convinced of this improbable crime can be imprisoned up to 10 years and may also be given hefty fines. Don't be surprised yet. We are still talking about 2006. This is the old law. In this original form, all the penal sections were non-cognizable. This is a term unique to penal codes of Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. A non-cognizable offense is one that police officers cannot investigate or make an arrest under without prior permission of a magistrate. However, the amendment of 2013 made 4 sections of the law cognizable, so that in future, judicial oversight would not be needed to enforce these pseudo-blasphemy law provisions, as well as making them non-bailable. Although Section 57 itself is not one of the cognizable offenses, the police have overcome that. Pretty clever. Here is a strategy. Here is the strategy they are following. In most cases, people are arrested under the cognizable Section 54 of the law, and then also implicated with the offenses of Section 57. This is how the law is being used in the interest of the religious fundamentalists, such that, in principle, any compliant of blasphemy can now be escalated by any police officer. In addition to the offense of defamation, the Penal Code had something to say about hurting religious belief, which was applicable for only print media, and the punishment for that was only 2 years of imprisonment. As if the Penal Code was not already restricting freedom of expression enough, the new amended ICT Act has made the criticism of religion on the internet punishable with up to 14 years of imprisonment. So it seems that you can get 14 years for criticizing religion online, but you only get 2 years to do so in the print media. This means that, just an example, a Facebook post to friends could get you a prison sentence 7 times longer than intentionally publishing an offensive front-page news story in a national newspaper. The ICT Act can indeed be used and misused to persecute critical writers, bloggers, journalists, and we have already seen ample examples of that. Islamic fundamentalism has spread for many years through Bangladesh via the support of all the political parties, and growing number of mosque, madrasa complexes all over the country, which have been established and funded by influential people, political people, and through the funding from few countries in the Middle East. Islamic fundamentalists use many madrasas as a way of spreading their message of hate and intolerance. And what has happened since my husband, Avi, since Washikur Rahman, since Ananta Bijoy Das have been killed? Almost nothing. They arrested the guy who was threatening Avijit online. He is a silly guy. He used to bug women online, used to ask for money, so we didn't take him seriously. And then they have banned the invisible online groups that had claimed responsibility for his murder. In all that time, neither the government nor the police have ever contacted me. It is as if I don't even exist. I'm still a Bangladeshi citizen. I heard this morning that the law enforcement in Bangladesh has captured 12 members of Al-Qaeda in Indian subcontinent, which actually announced a merger, like a corporate merger, with the fundamentalists who claimed responsibility for this blogger's death a few weeks ago. So I heard that they have captured 12 members of Al-Qaeda in Indian subcontinent, AQIS, from various parts of Dhaka on Wednesday, in connection with the killing of Avijit and several other writers and freethinkers. I haven't looked at the details yet, so I am going to reserve my comments on this. We will see how it works, how it plays out. Many people have asked me, what keeps me motivated? What keeps me going? What gets me through the night? Sleeping pills. It's the overwhelming active support and sympathy, actually. Though I have to confess that I'm not very good with taking sympathy from anybody. I've learned it the hard way. From family, friends, and thousands of known and unknown people, and the whole Mukto-Mona community. I was in the ICU for a few weeks. The Mukto-Mona moderators and advisors took up the work, moved it forward. The blog was getting hacked every day. We had technical problems, and they decided to move the servers, taking care of all the problems, and keep it going. This is what gives me motivation. Avijit not only wrote, throughout his life, he attempted to establish a strong platform in our country for practice of free thought and freedom of speech. Kabari Gayan, a Dhaka University professor who has also been listed in another hit list recently, sent me a personal note right after Avijit's death. Said, I know it has become our legal culture to use cleavers to protest writing. Still, after Avijit's murder, the taboo we had of taking a stand for an atheist and practitioner of free thought has broken down. Everywhere people are speaking up. Almost every day people are writing, holding protest meetings and rallies. This is what keeps me going. But as a student of history, we all know that the world does not move in a linear path. It twists and turns, moves backwards and forwards time to time. It takes a while to move forward. Changes do not happen overnight. Whenever I start to sink into the deep sense of my personal loss, I realize that for all intents and purposes, that I stand before you in a privileged position here today. I have been given a platform like this to speak. I have a comfortable life, a network of good friends and family who will support me through this ordeal. But what about those who have no voice, no agency, no platform? When the thousands of men and women get trafficked through the wild ocean, when girls get gang raped in a public vehicle, ISIS butchers behead, when they force girls into sexual slavery, when Boko Haram abducts hundreds of young women and sells them off in the medieval style, thousands of children die in poverty-stricken nations every day. I see that they do not have a voice. I firmly believe that we need to have a sense of collective responsibility and consciousness. These are not isolated events. We need to understand the global phenomena, the political, economic, and social connections here. I strongly believe that humanism has come a long way in the West through the heroic age of ancient Greece, influence from the medieval Persians, Moors, revival of classical studies during Renaissance, Reformation, Enlightenment, French Revolution, Industrial Revolution. But many parts of the world, including Bangladesh, we haven't gone through many of these political, economic, and social changes. Think about what the rest of the world, just to give a context, what the rest of the world was going through when the West was going through these changes in last few centuries. Indian subcontinent was a British colony. Africa was oppressed by many European powers. Aboriginals were getting killed systematically in the Americas. We also had slavery and racism backed by many of these powers. So the context was never the same across the board. That's why we need to be careful about how we talk about humanism to a specific culture, country. We should not try to impose it like the post-colonial Kamalism on any people or culture. We need to connect the dots of the specific political and economic evolution of a specific nation and culture with the global economic and political influence and the political games. Anyway, sometimes, especially in the past few months, I have thought about my own feelings a lot, actually. My own loss and outrage, so real, so important to me. It was so, it's funny to think back and think like when I used to give advice to people who lost someone and had no idea and said, you should get over it. It's so much about me. It's me, me, me. In my head, there is a bell going, me, me, me. And how these feelings contrast with the careless, indifferent, valueless universe in which we live in. This contrast between human values and careless universe is, of course, one of the great challenges of and to secular humanism. How can we cope with this paradox in our own minds? Maybe in two ways. First is to realize that this weightlessness, this valueness of the view from nowhere, of the careless universe, is nothing, maybe not that important for us to get going on an everyday basis. A zero. And therefore, it is nothing to worry about at this moment, at the present. What we are left with is us, ourselves, my thoughts and feelings, my losses as well as my triumphs, the meaning in life. These are all important because they are all that counts. And all these don't make any sense until we extend that realization as far as it will go in the human family and our earth and the rest of the world. It is not just ourselves, but each other, every trafficked slave, every martyred writer, every lost and lonely mind that are important and have value. We know this in theory, but we must right now in this world, on the brink of so many extraordinary outrages, reach out across international borders, extend our personal circles of care and empathy to include everyone, every human being, fully and confidently as a person of moral worth. This is the way we can celebrate Avijit's life, Ananto's life, and all those who have suffered or are at risk right now. In Bangladesh, they are fighting machetes with pen. We will also continue to fight. Everywhere, we must fight fundamentalism and all oppression with compassion and rationality and universalism, and with a deeper understanding of the conflicts. I think that is the 21st century challenge of humanism. Thank you.
Well, I think you'll all agree that was wonderful, powerful, very moving. One of the things that Bonya didn't say when she mentioned her few provisos, needing reading glasses, having scattered thoughts, was that this is the first public speech she's ever given. Yes, that would be
my fourth disclaimer.
So I don't think she did too badly. Well, we have about just over nearly 45 minutes, and what I'd like to do is have the privilege of maybe asking you a few questions myself, and then I'll open it up to the audience. We have various roving mics. You might need a minute or two to...
No, that's how they taught me to breathe in the hospital.
Okay.
They said, I'll feel all
You're not going to
better.
go all wobbly on me, and then I won't know what to do.
Didn't I train you?
You did. We were planning what would be the provisos. what should happen? Should I rush to?
No, I said pretend to catch me because you have an image too. So,
I can't
but
just
don't
sit
catch
here and
me.
watch
Let me
her
fall
faint,
when
you know.
I pretend to faint. Sorry.
I want to explore a little bit more about not just what's going on in Bangladesh today, but how you came to be part of this. Is it true that you and Avijit would not have gone back to Bangladesh back in February had it not been the current supposedly secular government in power? If it had been the previous conservative government, you wouldn't have risked going back to this book festival.
We actually, it's funny that you ask. 2 days before the event, the tragedy, this incident, my relative, we were talking about this because we were stopped by someone when we were actually roaming around the university area on a rickshaw. Someone stopped us and recognized us and said he is in intelligence, in government intelligence. He works for that, but he is a big fan. That's why he just recognized us. So we were talking about that. Is it like someone is following us? Is the government is protecting us? What's happening here? So Avijit said, maybe, if it were the other government, we wouldn't feel this safe. We are here because this government most probably will not kill me. So you are right.
And yet, you say the police who were there at the time stood by.
Sorry, I can't help laugh about that, yes.
I mean, but surely after that, there must have been, the government wouldn't have just been completely silent. There's, the international outrage, the murder of Avijit and the bloggers in the past years. What did the government do to follow up on this?
Let me surprise you. Yes, they were silent. They are still silent. Nobody has contacted me. Nobody has given a statement. Actually, the Prime Minister called Avijit's dad, who is a pretty renowned activist and professor and pretty respectable person in Bangladesh. She called him because he was the teacher of her husband. That night, the night when Avijit died, or the day after, and secretly talked to him without letting the press know that she called him. And it got, I think a friend of Avijit's dad leaked it later on. And 4 ministers actually met with Dr. Roy, and that was kept secret as well. Not only that, the funny thing is, Reuters was doing an investigative reporting on me. He came, the journalists spent quite a bit of time with me. And then when the Bangladesh embassy got to know about that, suddenly he got a call. It was a couple of days before the article was coming out. And he gets a call that the son of the prime minister, who lobbies in DC, wants to talk to him. And he took him out for lunch. And actually, it is in the Reuters article. I don't remember exactly, but paraphrasing him, he actually said, it is all a perception. This is not reality. We can't stand by these atheist bloggers because then we will be perceived and taken advantage of by the more conservative people. And I think he also said the people who are dying on the street by petrol bombs and other things are equally important as Avijit Roy. So that's where we stand today.
So you could sort of believe it if it was behind closed doors, the government saying, actually, we don't want to rock the boat. If we show solidarity with these atheist bloggers, then it's just going to cause us trouble. They're openly admitting that they will not.
Yeah, I'm not very active in social media, but I could not help it. After that interview, I actually posted that, oh, thanks for your honesty. I was just thinking, how could you say that? Isn't that my line? Like, why are you like saying that? And some adjectives with that. Yeah.
I don't know how many people. So, Bonya mentioned that in the news this morning, the Bangladeshi authorities have arrested 12 so-called Al-Qaeda activists. Al-Qaeda, the Indian branch, fan club.
Indian subcontinent
Al-Qaeda. Right. And we don't know, I certainly don't know all the details about that. But I mean, I've heard it, only sort of people talking about it today, I've heard it said that this may well be a simply for show, literally to coincide with you giving the Voltaire lecture tonight.
That's why I was reserving commenting on this. I have actually someone forwarded that news to me while I was doing other things this morning. The lecture was written halfway by that time, so I had to work on it through the day. I don't know. There have been so much of miscommunication, everything and a lot of things that they have said about me. A few days ago, actually, a news came out. Someone from law enforcement told media that a friend of mine that we were really talking to in Bangladesh actually leaked the information to the terrorists. My friend. I don't have a friend in Bangladesh that I was talking to. So, I thought it will be professional for the law enforcement to talk to me, or at least, they might not agree with me, but at least ask me when they find out something. I guess they don't know I exist.
Incredible. I mean, you say you don't have. I mean, you must have friends. Do you have family still in friends, not just?
No, I do, but I don't have such friends.
Because Avijit, you say Avijit's father is a prominent intellectual in Bangladesh.
Yes.
Do you still have family there?
Not my
not
direct
immediate family.
My immediate family. No, my mom was there visiting with me. She has almost lost 10 years from her life. She forgets things, like what happened to that Iron Lady. But yeah.
You mentioned before the lecture that just 2 nights before Avijit was murdered, you and he were discussing writing a book together, and you'd even.
Everybody.
You don't want to talk about that?
Sure.
So I just thought I'll surprise you. This is what happens. You chat to me before. Well, I'll ask her that. That'll be fun.
I always get in trouble for talking.
Yeah. Well, if you don't want to talk about it, but I mean, you had all these plans, and so much left to do. I mean, to some extent, you're sort of taking on that burden now yourself, and it's a heavy burden. I mean, you're not sitting back and thinking, well, look, I just have to somehow carry on living. You're doing more than that. You're trying to
actually
live
I have a lot
both
of help.
Of your
As I
lives.
have mentioned, there is a huge community of Mukto-Mona bloggers, moderators, and young people who have come forward helping me out. They are taking care of a lot of things. Not only they're taking care of a lot of things, they're already talking about taking Mukto-Mona to the different level. They don't want to stop, they want to go on. So, yeah, we want to take that to the next step.
Most of them presumably not in Bangladesh.
A lot of them are. A lot of them are getting haunted. They actually forward me the text messages sometimes saying, like Avijit, the Hindu, whatever the words I cannot say, you will also meet your, whoever up there soon. So they are getting, this is real. It's mind-boggling.
I think for many in Britain, we hear about it, but it's just it's news, and it sits alongside all the other atrocities, ISIS and so on, that carrying on around the world. But I'm sure many people here this evening were at the World Humanist Congress last year in Oxford, which was here in Britain. And what was so powerful there was that speaker after speaker from places like Bangladesh, from Uganda and Nigeria, speaking up, talking about their courage. And I remember just sitting there, and I'm crying. I'm trying to sort of, hold things here. And I look at how embarrassing. I look around, everyone else is crying as well. Well, Andrew Copson, well, he
No. This is like people, like Avijit's fans will call me and cry and sob and break down. And I go, no, it's okay. And I'm thinking in my head, isn't it supposed to be the other way around, that I cry and you tell me to stop?
Yeah, it's one thing to be outspoken when you know you're going to get online and you're going to be criticized for your blog. But another, you're saying a lot of these bloggers who had writing under a different name and haven't been exposed, and yet carrying on doing what they're doing.
Yeah. I feel ashamed when they tell me that you are our inspiration. I'm like, I'm sitting in Atlanta writing, I'm in a much safer place than you guys are. It's amazing to see the spirit. I guess change happens this way. This is how
you mentioned the world will change and changes unexpectedly. It starts, and sometimes it takes one step forward, two steps backwards. Do you see a change overall, a change for the better? We have seen this rise in fundamentalist Islam in the past couple of decades, but in general, I mentioned in my introduction, we congratulate ourselves in this country that we are seeing an increase in sort of secularization of society and especially young people moving away from religion.
Yeah.
Are you seeing the same in other countries? In Bangladesh, are more and more people?
I see both the waves going.
Is it getting more polarized?
Yes, I don't think this is just Bangladesh. I think it's a global phenomena, and I also think, as you asked, that if I think it will change, when did we stop? It always changed, right? It will change for the better or the worse, but it will change. There will be changes, right? Depends on what we do today.
Well, a couple of years ago, the Voltaire lecturer was the American psychologist Steven Pinker.
Yeah, I know.
And he was talking about his book, The Better Angels of Our Nature. And he argues that actually the world
violence
is getting
has
less
gone
violent.
down. Yes,
and that's sometimes hard. I know it's because we're bombarded in the news by the atrocities, but it is sometimes hard to feel that we're living in a safer world.
Yeah, Avijit and I used to, he used to say, what tells you that we will not be just, the whole earth is not going to be bombed, or, I think something is going to happen. And I didn't think it would, because I think we have modern communication, modern technology today to talk about everything. Anything happens here, Now, this is getting live streaming or whatever, so people from around the world can see this. So I do think Pinker is right about this. The violence was actually much worse before. It's our awareness about the violence makes us think, and it's how our parents said, our age was better than, we were better than you. So it's kind of like that.
Well, in some respects, certainly when it comes to fundamentalist Islam, I think that is true. I don't know if many people saw, there was a picture, someone tweeted a picture last year of the graduating class from Cairo University Medical School, the women from Cairo University Medical School who graduated. In 1950, not one of them was wearing a hijab.
It's the same case in Bangladesh too.
1980 was about half.
Yes.
2000 was about 3/4. Last year it was everyone.
There you go.
And
this is a global phenomenon.
And my father always says, he said that young women who insist on coming, he said, your mothers fought for the right not to.
Yes. My mom was a lawyer in Bangladesh in 1970. I have heard people, the men in the neighborhood, calling her a man, not a woman. But, she was a lawyer. My mom actually says this. It's like, you know, when I go back to Bangladesh and I see all these like women my age wearing hijab, I just don't know what to do. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, yeah, it is very true.
Do you think it's a fault of us humanists that we're somehow optimistic about the world? If we think the world is getting better, is it because we, you know, what defines a humanist is that you sort of see the positive in human nature?
The fake positive.
On the whole, people are good and will come to their senses. When
like my conclusion.
Like your conclusion. Do you, I mean, many would argue that we're naive in thinking that good will conquer evil.
I don't know if there is like evil or good as such as we think. Anyway, sorry, that is a bigger philosophical. I'm actually reading a lot of philosophy now.
Well, look, before we get too deep, it
yes,
might be
or
an
dark,
idea.
Or too dark.
Or too dark.
Yes.
For me to stop asking pointless questions and open it up to the audience. So I believe we have 4 roving mics who are going to be scattered around the place. So I'd like to see a show of hands from people who would wish to ask some questions. So we have hands coming up there, yeah?
Hello, I'm Geeta Sehgal from the Center for Secular Space. Thank you so much for your lecture and for your optimism, your very brave optimism at the end of it. I wonder if you could comment, because we who live here in London, but who also work in South Asia and many other countries, are involved in a campaign against the spread of Sharia courts in this country, which have introduced a parallel legal system. There are people that I investigated who were involved with fatwas and killings in Bangladesh in '71, who are people running these courts. We see a connection between blasphemy laws, parallel legal systems such as Sharia courts, and restrictions on human rights and civil liberties. Do you see those connections, and would you join our campaign against parallel laws and Sharia courts over here?
Did she just ask me for a commitment?
I think so. I think there's probably an application
Public
form
commitment.
outside waiting for you.
There has been rise of these fundamentalistic view. But there is no Sharia court in Bangladesh, legal Sharia courts in Bangladesh. I don't think there is. But there are fatwas, the things that you mentioned. There are those. And this is part of the rise of fundamentalism. I can't emphasize more that this is not only in Bangladesh. I personally think, I'd like to do more research on this, but I think this is happening in many parts of the world for the last few decades.
Just to clarify, our campaign is here in Britain. There's a huge rise in these, and the people I was speaking about are people involved with war crimes in Bangladesh who were indicted. I researched them many years ago, and they run the Sharia courts here in some cases.
Yeah, I have heard. Actually, we had in Mukto-Mona, if you're talking about that, we actually talked about this, about the Sharia court possibility in Canada and how this is also rising in Europe. I never understood how you can have a Sharia court in Europe. I'm sorry, it blows my mind. So much for whatever kind of rights that is.
Cultural relativism.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your incredibly powerful remarks.
Thank you.
Has your relationship to Bangladesh, to the idea of Bangladesh, the reality of it, changed in the last 4 months?
No. That's why I like to look at things from holistic point of view. This is not an isolated event. Again, it's me, right? It's me, my loss, I cry. I sit there, I literally can, this might sound creepy, I can literally sit in my house and hear the silence and actually see the darkness, but no, it doesn't change the way, we miscalculated. My daughter says this, like, you and Dad, underestimated the situation in Bangladesh. Don't do that in London. So, no, you have to see these things from a very, from 30,000 feet view first, before you actually dig in. You have to understand the history. You have to understand what's going on in the political arena over the world for last, post-Second World War, how the world has changed, what the connections are. Where the connections are. Fundamentalism was supported by many fronts. It's not only like one or two areas. Let's not get into that details, but I think I still have the same view. I have actually a deeper understanding through my personal loss of what is really happening, and I feel a need that I need to understand more and study more about these connections.
Okay, so we have. Let's try and go to the back. So there's a gentleman there because your hand went up very early on. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Was really good to hear your speech, and it's nice to see that you're well, and I hope you keep well. With the view from the history of what happened in Pakistan and how Bangladesh came about, and it's obvious that these groups are well financed, well trained, and they're well networked as well. In this view, how should we look at these new, or relatively new organizations? And how do you feel the media over here has presented these groups to us?
Do you mean organizations that like Al-Qaeda,
like ISIS, not just that, but also conservative, conservative who are sort of like if you want to make a comparison, you could say they're like the IRA and Sinn Féin. One is a violent group, while you have like the political wings that sort of give them lip service, and other like the political sort of people that back them in a very indirect, very insidious way.
Is your question, how do we go about combating the
more
savvy political...
Yeah, but here in the media think that...
Are you asking if media is covering, the way the media is covering, what is my opinion?
Well, from my own personal view, I think that some of it is they lie about it, and they don't really tell us the truth about these organizations. Like, for instance...
sometimes, yeah.
Like, for instance... ISIS, but the media here say that when ISIS took over Homs, they said it was about 3,500 fighters. But then when you talk to people like Abdel Bari Atwan, who was interviewed about it, he said there's about 100,000. So how should we look at these organizations? Because we're getting different...
There have been a lot of miscommunications about my story in the media. And I actually, to be honest, have avoided media as much as I could. A media in the West, or anywhere, actually, I do not think they're as free as we think they are. I really believe that they are also binded by a lot of, obligations and other things. So everything that we hear in media will not be right. There are real limitations to get the real story, and also there is this, the tendency to create sensational news, right? This is a business too. The creation of this, trying to create the sensation actually bothers me a lot.
Well, it's one thing for the tabloid press to make up celebrity gossip stories that are completely
I'm actually
fabricated.
talking about mainstream
But we're
media.
talking about, I mean, mainstream reporting on international events. Do you think it's ignorance, or you're not doing their homework properly, or not getting the right information, or is there some insidious, deeper agenda where
sometimes as well, I think. And you know, that like I used to laugh at this, like looking at you know, some news and say, okay, so your husband was killed this way. How do you feel? How do I feel? Not to me, but I'm saying, you know, those are the kind of questions. So how do you define those? So that's the sensational part that I'm talking about.
But that's different to potentially deliberately giving a wrong impression of, say, how many ISIS troops there were in some parts of Syria.
You know, I want to say a lot, but I don't want to right now, because I think I should actually know the facts before I, you know, give my opinion or feelings about this. So.
Fair enough.
Okay.
We had a question in the back there. Yeah.
Hello, is it working? Hello, my name is Faisal Ghazi. I'm a blogger here in the UK. Bonya, thanks very much for your amazing lecture and your profound bravery in the face of this, these amazing set of circumstances that you're now living through. My question to you is basically about the distinction between humanism as a set of values and political activism. Do you think, you know, you have a set of values in, for example, in Bangladesh under the Mukto-Mona movement who are humanists, and you also have people who are politically activists. Are they connected?
Just hit the
And
nail.
as a secondary question to that.
Well, the first one was very good.
Yes.
Thank you. The second one is related to the first, is what do you think that the Bangladesh government has to fear from humanists?
Go for it.
Okay, so the first part, that was actually one of the biggest debates I used to have with Avijit. Avijit looked at it from very, to me, I think, he would have protested right now and knocked me down right now if he were here. But to me, like to him, humanism is more like the Western, you know, the history of what I talked about. It's more individualistic. It's more like, you know, from your belief system. You don't believe in such and such things, and how his books focused on how an individual, how it works in your head, a religion works in your head, or, you know, what is the philosophy behind the disbelief that we had historically, or scientifically how it spreads like a virus. But to me, I think that was actually the discussion I just had with you about the book. So I haven't written in the last 2-3 years. After I was diagnosed with cancer in 2011 and had the surgeries, I kind of like stopped writing. And Avijit used to complain and whine about this. So he actually, we were in Bangladesh on the 24th of February. We were up at 5 a.m. in the morning because of jet lag. And we were sitting in my friend's house. I do have friends. And then getting served like tea and from the maids. And we were talking, and he goes, "Why don't you write?" I'm like, "Oh gosh, again." I said, and then finally I said, "Okay, fine, I agree to write with you." He goes, "Why don't you finish your human evolution book, the next part of your first book?" I'm like, no. I went so deep into the genetics in there, my head cannot go back in there. I said, but I have been reading philosophy and history for a little while, and I would actually say your books are great. It actually talks about one aspect of humanism. But what about connecting that with the history, the history of religion, how the powerful people politically, economically used religion to inflict on people, and how that actually played a huge role in our history, right? There's a reason why religion survived. So he said, great. He would say yes to anything. He would say, great, yeah, as long as I write. So let's write. And then he gets very, very worried. And he goes, that will be, actually, if you want to cover like all 2,000-3,000 years, that'll be a very big book. So let's divide it up. We sat down, noted the chapters, and there were like 10 chapters in each, and we did that. So to answer your question, I have a little slightly different view on this than Avijit did. I think nothing can be explained without actually understanding the history of the political, economic, and social aspect. It's a hard job. It's very easy. I have actually criticized this a lot, that a lot of humanists, especially in blogs, like what we tried to take it very seriously. It's not just writing whatever you think without knowing the philosophy, the deeper aspect of it. So it's very easy to come and just criticize religion, or say, religion does this. But have you really looked, in deeper sense, that how they are interconnected? So to me, I don't know if you want to call it political activism. To me, politics, you have to understand history. You have to understand the political dynamics, the economic aspects, the global economy, if you want to understand how you want to pursue your humanism. You might say, I don't want to be political. That's fine, as long as you understand the dynamics there, and you take your decisions based on your understanding.
I mean, I think throughout history, you're right, but because religion has played such a big role in maintaining power over people, that humanism and political activism are obviously intertwined. But some could argue the opposite. In Soviet Union, in China, it's those who are fighting for their religious freedom. For them, it's the other side of the coin that is intertwined with political activism.
Yes, these
but it's freedom of
speech and freedom of thoughts, right? But here's the thing. Again, I go back to your freedom of thoughts, right? What I said, we sit here and talk about freedom of thoughts, right? But think about a country like Bangladesh, thousands, actually millions of people living in poverty. They cannot get 3 meals a day. African kids dying because they cannot get even water, drinking water, right? So how do you differentiate that? Why are they in that situation? If this is not politics, this is not economy, this is not the global economic phenomena. Go ask a rickshaw driver in Bangladesh, how much does he really think about religion? Or freedom of speech, does he have one? So, it's a bigger question. We need a deeper understanding of this. I'm not going to get into that because that will be
What about
long.
The question, a second question, about the Bangladeshi government? What was it, and its views on humanism? Was that the question?
Are they threatened by humanism?
Are they threatened by humanism? Yeah.
Yes, they are. Depends on which version of humanism, but it doesn't matter actually. This is actually, we're talking about freedom of speech when we're talking about humanism, right? We are humanists. I think we are still minority in the world if you look at the total population of the world. So a country which is struggling with poverty, with political, freedom, with basic rights, of course they are threatened by it. They are threatened by it. The religious, fundamentalist, conservative, they are threatened by it. A lot of people are threatened by it.
Let's have some more questions.
Right, thank you. I'm John Dowdall. I'm the president of Watford Area Humanists. The Secular Policy Institute in the USA have sent a message of support to you and for the talk this evening. Okay? The question I wanted to ask you was, are you thinking of setting up a foundation in the name of your late husband to take the cause of global humanism forward?
That has come up a couple of times already, but it's like he established Mukto-Mona. We have never taken any funding from anybody. We try to do it ourselves just to maintain our freedom. It's a bigger undertaking. You know, I also have to think about practical aspects of how do I support myself. You know, I have to make a living. I have to support my daughter going forward. Avijit never thought about these things, trust me. So this was like too earthly, too materialistic for him. So I tried to tell him this many times that, hey, you know, let's make some decisions now, like financially, so that you can write forever. And like, no, it's too much work. So this has come up many times. Thanks for mentioning it. Maybe in the future, but I really cannot make any decisions right now. I used to wake up every morning and think what I'm going to do for the rest of the day. Now it has come to like a week at a time, so not within a week though. Sorry. No.
Yes.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much for just being you and what you do. With a view to the different cultural and economic backgrounds of the countries that we've spoken about tonight, what is the best way for British humanists to support a Bangladeshi humanist?
Very good question. They are actually supporting a lot. We have got a lot of international support through this. What I will ask you guys, I'll ask the international humanist organizations is to have a little better understanding of what's going on, just not like, you know, what someone is saying. Understand. For that, you have to invest a little bit of time. Maybe you can have one person devoting and learning about a country more, and you know, make it before you make decisions. That would be a good thing. But I am actually very surprised to see the level of support internationally that we have got all through the world.
What's the support like in the US for humanism? I know Richard Dawkins has said that it's much, much easier in the US to come out as gay than it is to come out as an atheist.
Where, in the States?
In the States.
Okay, no, he's right. He's right. Yes, it is. And being a gay is hard over there. It's still hard in some places.
Hopefully a bit easier now.
The last week, yes. It's not as accepted as it is here. It is actually, I have heard stories after stories, but I have been an open atheist at work. People come to me and say, what do you do when you feel like inside, you know, where is your God? So I actually went to a restaurant the other day, and this is what happened. I have to tell you the story. So I walk in and I'm praying that they don't recognize me.
When you say praying?
There is no up and down, right. So that doesn't mean anything. So I'm walking in, I'm whispering to my daughter, praying, that, oh, I hope he doesn't recognize me with this hair and everything else. So I walk in and he doesn't say anything. We order food, and then when he's delivering the food, he goes, you know what, I'm so sorry. He has seen me for 16 years. How he cannot recognize me, stupid me. So, and then he goes, I read every story, and it's so bad that people do this to people, and what you do, but keep in faith, keep your faith. He goes, keep your faith. I go, and I was in a very different mood that day. Normally I ignore these things. And I go, I look up like this, I go, I don't see anything. He's an old man, I shouldn't have done this to him.
Well, look, I appreciate there were still lots of hands up and some of you who wanted to ask a question from the start, but we have run out of time. And I've been told to stick to time, so I do apologise for those of you who, oh, look, one last question. Go on then. Right, one last question. Make it quick, make it good.
Hi, I'm Onunna, and my question to you is it, do we combat this kind of fundamentalism only with the pen? Do you think it's possible only with the pen or the political action?
Yes, it's not possible only with pen. But that's all. Like, this is a good question for Avijit. He would have told you, that's all I can do. You do your part, I do my part, we all do our parts. So, it's a collective effort.
Thank you very much. Well, in case it gets drowned out in the applause, can I just say, first of all, that when you leave, you should leave via the fire exit there where Ian is waving his hands rather than from the back. Thank you all very much. Thank you for those who've asked some very pertinent and interesting questions. But most of all, thank you to you, Bonya. I mean, your courage, your commitment is inspiring. I think for most of us, that's as much as we can be, inspired.
Right.
As many have asked, we'd like to know what we can do to support you. Well, I guess what we can do is what we do. We don't have your courage. We can go away and spread the word and tell your story. And we really wish you the very best in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, Bonya Ahmed.